Imagine growing up knowing that your name, just your name, could be the reason people question your identity, dismiss your job application, or think you're a walking joke. Imagine being saddled with a name so loaded, so infamous, that you'd spend your entire life convincing people it's real. Now imagine being the parent who has to stop that from happening. This is the story of how I became the villain in my own marriage, simply for refusing to name my son John Doe. It started 6 months into my wife's pregnancy. We'd just come back from a routine ultrasound. She was glowing. I was exhausted but happy, a little nervous, a little overwhelmed. Normal things. We sat down on the couch that night, hands over her belly, talking names. That's when she said it, with a softness in her voice that made me immediately pause. I want to name him John, after my grandfather. I froze, not because the name wasn't beautiful. Her grandfather was a good man, honest, brave. He died last September after a long battle with cancer, and my wife adored him. He was her rock. Naming our son after him made perfect sense to her. But I carry a last name that I've lived with my whole life. One that gets chuckles, jokes, eye rolls. One that, when paired with John, transforms into something far more complicated. Doe. My name is Doe. And if we named our son John, he would be, quite literally, John Doe. I laughed at first, out of disbelief, out of fear, out of the sheer absurdity of it. But she wasn't laughing. She was already picturing the birth certificate. My heart sank. She couldn't see what I saw. Not yet. Not the lifetime of paperwork errors. Not the airport security checks. Not the job interviewers tossing out resumes they assumed were fake. Not the blank stares from teachers. The questions from classmates. The uncomfortable silence when he introduces himself and people think it's a joke. No one would believe it was real. John Doe is the name given to unidentified dead men, to corpses, to the faceless and forgotten. It's a placeholder, not a name you give your child. I told her I couldn't do it, and that's when everything cracked open. She looked at me like I just spat on her grandfather's grave. Her voice trembled. Her eyes hardened. She couldn't believe I would veto a name with so much meaning. A name tied to a man who shaped her life, who taught her how to ride a bike, who held her hand through her first heartbreak, who told her stories every night when the world felt too loud. To her, this wasn't just a name. It was love, memory, grief wrapped in something tangible. But to me, it was a lifetime sentence for a boy who hadn't even taken his first breath. We argued for days, then weeks. It kept coming back, no matter how many times I thought we'd buried it. She offered it as a middle name. At least let him have it as a middle name, she begged. But even then, I flinched, because the moment you put John next to Doe, it's all people see. Even if it's the middle name, even if it's buried under layers of initials and nicknames, it's still there. She said I was exaggerating, that I was making problems where none would exist. But I've worked in the real world. I've seen what happens to people with names that sound like punchlines. I've seen applications flagged. I've seen security checks escalate. I've seen names become barriers. I couldn't do that to my son. She said I was robbing her of the chance to honor someone she loved, that I was thinking like a machine, not a father, that I cared more about hypotheticals than her heart. I started to wonder if she was right. Was I heartless for putting logic before legacy? Every time I looked at her, I could see the hole her grandfather left behind. I could see the way she touched her belly and whispered his name like a promise. I knew what this meant to her, but I also knew what it would mean for our son. One night, I stayed up reading about people actually named John Doe. Real people. One man talked about how he was pulled aside by airport security every single time he flew. Another said he was once mistaken for a body at a hospital and almost missed an emergency surgery because of a clerical mix-up. There were stories of mail never arriving, accounts being flagged, even someone being denied a driver's license on suspicion of fraud. It wasn't theoretical, it was real. I brought those stories to her. I sat her down and read them out loud. She listened, silent, tearful. Then she asked me a question that shattered me. Do you think my grandfather would have wanted his name to make his great-grandson suffer? And I didn't know how to answer, because the truth is, I don't think he would. I think he would have smiled, called it silly, and told us to pick a name that meant something new. We haven't resolved it yet. Not fully. The baby isn't here yet. The clock is still ticking. But we've started exploring compromises. She's considering using her grandfather's middle name, or perhaps a cultural variation of John, something that nods to the past without burdening the future. We even joked, gently, about naming him something completely different and just telling stories about Grandpa John as he grows up. Stories that don't need a shared name to carry weight. But I still wonder, was I wrong to shut it down so hard? To say no before I said maybe? To put the future ahead of the past? So, am I the asshole? This story hits deep because names, they're not just labels. They're identities. They're first impressions. They're echoes of the people we come from and the people we hope our children become. But sometimes, love for the past can blind us to the burdens we're placing on the future. And that's the real conflict here. Legacy versus protection. Sentiment versus foresight. This wasn't a story about disrespect. It was a story about care. About a father trying to shield his son from a life of unnecessary confusion. And about a mother trying to keep the memory of her grandfather alive in the most sacred way she knows. And maybe the answer isn't in compromise of names, but in what we teach our children about those names. That honoring someone doesn't always mean repeating them. It can mean embodying them. So what do you think? Would you name your child John Doe, knowing what the world might do with it? Let us know in the comments. And if you've ever had to fight over a name, whether as a parent or a kid, drop your story below. This has been AITA Story Vault. Real voices, real dilemmas, and the quiet battles we fight in the most intimate corners of life. Until next time, choose names with heart, but don't forget the world your child will have to live in.